Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I am Lopita, the event organizer of Conferencia World. I welcome and thank you all for participating in the webinar on digital transformation and customer experience. Conferencia World is the professional conference and event organizer. We aim to empower our clients with up-to-date information for the future growth and development within their respective industries. Today, we are more than happy to have Ivelin Kirchhoff from Bayer as our speaker for the session on competition and data privacy for digital transformation. Ivelin is currently the head of law, patents, compliance, and data privacy at Bayer for Romania, Bulgaria, and Moldova. He was the member of the Global Practice Group Antitrust at Bayer and implemented GDPR for Bayer Group in 2017. He possesses a master's degree in law and international relations, as well as with a number of certifications from international organizations in the legal area. And we welcome Ivelin now for the presentation. And I would request the participants to put their questions in the chat room, and Ivelin will take up the questions after his presentation. And now Ivelin will be sharing his screen. And after his presentation, he would upload his PPT as well in the file option, which will come in the chat room as well for everyone to see. Thank you. And Ivelin, there you go.
Thank you, Lupita. Thanks everyone for joining. Just let me share my screen for the presentation. Okay. I hope that you can see my screen, just to confirm that. Yes. Okay. So today what we are going to look into in more details is some competition and data privacy aspects for digital transformation. We'll go through a couple of topics. As you can see here, one is the so-called fear of the incumbent in innovation, which is something that authorities, be it antitrust authorities, competition authorities, or regulatory bodies in general are looking into it. I'd say huge interest in the last couple of years, and they will continue to do so. Then we go into the privacy and how it goes into digital transformation, where we can find the balance between interests and protection of the person, of the data subject, and the interests of the company and innovation and digital transformation. And finally, a couple, let's say, points for advice on a strategy to create compliant algorithms. To look into the so-called fear of the incumbent, where does it come from, and why are authorities so keen to look into different probes of Google, for example, Facebook, Amazon, etc. Maybe you've seen the news and read as of last year, both the House of Representatives and the Congress in the US have opened a couple of probes into Google, Amazon, Facebook, and also Apple. Mainly because first they are huge, big companies, because they're tech giants, but most of all because of their behavior on the market. And to see how economists and authorities as well look into the markets of digital economy, just to mark some aspects that this entails. For the digital economy, first of all, there are these extreme returns to scale. This means that the production costs that you would have for developing a certain digital service are relatively low compared to the income or the population of customers that you might get. I mean, this is not a new concept. You've seen it with bigger factories who have better returns to scale. But in the digital economy, this is at an entirely new level. Network externalities, this is the situation where you have developed a product and you maybe are the first firm and first company on the market, maybe not the first, but you manage to gather more and more customers for your platform. And at a certain point in time, because it's a service and there is this loop, if you provide a good service, you get more people, then you get more advertising, which lets you invest more into the platform or the respective service that you are providing. And with that, you can get more customers, and it's a ever-going loop. If, let's say, another player wants to enter the market, it's usually very, very difficult to do so. Just look into social media, for example, Facebook and also Instagram. They're both being held by Facebook as parent companies, the holding. And it would be extremely difficult for someone to develop similar service in the area of social networking, as it in the end might prove to be impossible. So even if it's a better product, you need a critical mass of customers that you need to take over and to start using your platform in order for it to develop and to make profit out of it. And strictly speaking, why move to a different platform if everyone is on Facebook? Just to give an overview how it looks. Data, the role of data in digital economy. I mean, we can spend a lot of time on this, but it's more than obvious that it is really, really great as an impact, both on the input side, what you get as input data from your customers, and what you get out of it when you process it and you run it through your algorithms and through your systems. And what you can do with that data and the way you can work with it and produce valuable output also gives something to you which maybe nobody else on the market can have. If you have, let's say, all the customers of a platform, then you're the only one who gets that data. In the end, you're the only one who can process that data and make the respective adjustments and sales strategy and use it in such a way to enhance your service, keep the customers, and pretty much not allow anyone else on the market. So in all those three, they lead to the so-called economies of scope, which favor the development of ecosystems and give incumbents a very strong competitive advantage. And here are the two high risks that are being identified by authorities. One is the large incumbent digital players, and the second, abusive dominance. Maybe just to clarify what the abusive dominance means. If you are on a market and you hold, let's say, the bigger portion of that market, in terms of percentage, it can be anywhere between 40% and 70%, or even why not above 90% of the market, you consider to have significant market power. But for you to be really dominant, then you should be able to act on the market rather independently of the other players that are your competitors. And it's not bad being a dominant company. You've worked hard for it. The bad part comes if you try to abuse that power that you have. It could be some exploitative abuses. Take, for example, you're the only one on the market, which means customers have to buy their products only from you, so you can put whatever price tag you want on your product, and of course make customers pay more for the products, even they are not worth that much. Or you can have some exclusionary behavior, mainly related to your competitors. You put barriers to entry for the market. One of them could be specific agreements you've put with your suppliers, with your distributors, retailers, that do not allow for them to procure services or goods from other players on the market. And in that way, you're closing the market for yourself, which are, of course, all behaviors that authorities are not very happy to see and respectively sanction. To go into a bit more details into the digital markets, when an antitrust commission or a body looks into the so-called relevant markets, they look into the respective product market combined with the respective territory to get to this so-called relevant market. What is specific about digital markets is that they're multi-sided, meaning if you have a platform where you have customers that are using some social media services or social networking, they are on the one side. On the other side, you have advertisers. And those two groups, the platform is connecting. That makes, in this case, two sides, but you can have some other players also that are interacting. The cross externalities that we briefly touched upon, also so-called network externalities for the incumbent, and that being difficult for other players to enter if you've got most of the customers already for you. A typical analysis of a market would go into the money flow. So in terms of value, and that's how usually, and in past years, everyone's been looking at, let's say, regular markets. But it's become clear that data flow is as much as important these days, and maybe more important in digital markets than the monetary flow. And it entails thorough assessment and evaluation of the input, the output, where the data goes, what are the systems, are the barriers. And for those markets, it's also hard to define the respective market boundaries. And could be that you have a small market, then an adjacent market, that they merge together, or by working on one specific field, you also can access additional areas. Like, for example, Facebook, they took over WhatsApp some years ago. Initially, they have slightly different purposes, but you can put them all in one broader market altogether. And of course, Facebook wanted to use the data that was already present for WhatsApp and its users and potentially incorporate it into its own dealings. The situation with market power in the digital markets, very often you would have zero price services for consumers. And the reason that you have those zero price services for your consumers is that you give those services for exchange of their data. And if you are looking into customer experience, what you want to see is better and better experience. Me as a consumer, I like technology. I like to use one button to make an order or to check additional information. And if you have this in one area of your life, you potentially start looking forward to having it in all other areas of your life. If it's transportation, food and beverages, healthcare, you name it. Which brings companies to another model, that is, you get free service, or at least you get some services for free and some premium services you get for specific payment. But if I give it to you for free, then you give me some of your data, which I can use in my algorithms, make some predictions, then tailor some specific services and offers for you, which in the end would benefit me again, because you would continue buying from me. Something that is also important for digital markets is, if in traditional markets you are competing in a specific market, you can take some retail or FMCG industry, and you know that today I may have 5% of the market. In a couple of years, potentially it could grow 10, 15, 30%. There are some larger companies who could have larger markets. But in the end, those markets have a number of players. For the digital market, it's very often the case that you compete for the market, meaning for the entire market. And if we touch upon, again, On the example given a moment ago for Facebook and their social network, it's pretty much the case. Once you get it, you pretty much take hold. And then for the market power, it's very important to see the data. Is it available for everyone? Usually not. What's the scale and scope of the data? Is it usable, and how best you can use it in your algorithms? And then one thing that is also very specific for markets, it's the market for digital markets, it's the market transparency. It has both positive and negative aspects. In one situation looked by consumers, transparent markets, they allow you to compare prices, to compare characteristics of the products, to see potential developments, not only in your country, but throughout the entire world, and it's good for the consumers. On the other hand, what you have as a negative effect of this market transparency is the distortion of competition, because I can always look up online or prepare an algorithm who monitors prices of my competitors, and we can get into a collusion that in the end would reach, for example, fixing of prices or allocation of customers, which are all forbidden behaviors from the point of competition law. I don't know if there are any questions until now, or we wait maybe for the end. If we look into privacy and the digital transformation for customers, again, an example, any consumer, any customer, they would like to get better service, and the better it is, the happier the customer is, and if it's free, it's even better. But then it comes, how am I paying for that? Usually, if it's a free service, you will be paying with data for that service. And here comes the fragile balance between people, natural people have their rights as natural persons, and they have the right to privacy in their lives, but at the same time, they want also better services, which are defined by the level of analysis that can be done with their data, and respectively to have really profiled offers that can go directly to a specific customer. And if you look into this picture here, there are many positives of working with data privacy and the rules it gives. Once, if you are a company that respects data privacy and looks into the situation of the customers respectively, then those customers are prone to trust in you, which means that if I'm a customer, I'm willing to give you more data because I know it will be better handled, you will keep it confidential, you will not misuse it, you will not give it to third parties, and the more I trust in you, the more data I give you. Then there are many rules which guide the free movement of personal data, which is something to welcome in terms of the economy. Data portability, some new concept introduced by the GDPR, meaning that customers can switch between different platforms in a way that one company should be able, under certain conditions, to transfer a copy of the data of the customer to them or even to a third party, and that customer can go to another company with that set of data and start the service with already existing and built up data. Fair share of the innovation and benefits it brings, that's for both customers and the society as a whole, because data privacy, especially in the European Union, is considered a fundamental right, meaning if companies are willing to use that data, they should have respective precautions and measures in place that guard that right. And it should not be at the expense of innovation that those rights are not complied with. On the other hand, you have some negative aspects for a business, meaning that sometimes, especially in some jurisdictions, again, example, the European Union, very, very tight requirements under privacy laws, which means you have time-consuming procedures which you need to go through. If you want to create a new application, you now have the requirement to apply the so-called privacy by design, to look into the different aspects even before you put that application on the market, and be able to make sure that your customers' data is being properly protected. Then there's this administrative burden of many procedures, sometimes with consultation with authorities, different investigations, checks, of course, which does not make life of the companies easy. And something that is a bit contradictory to the digital world and its fast pace is that those procedures that we've just talked about, those assessments of data privacy impact and different evaluations, they're usually time consuming, which means that you either have to have additional resources so that you don't slow down in your production, or if you don't have the additional resources, you'd have to spend some more time before you put the product on the market because of these additional requirements that you have on the part of data privacy. As I mentioned before, this interesting right of data portability for the data subjects, it can facilitate switching between different data-driven services. That's on one side. On the other side, it could create some difficulties for the companies to decide which is the best option for them. So yeah, GDPR as such, it recommends that the right of data portability is used in a way that a format that is recognized by many companies may be used. So it's easier for people to switch between one service provider to the other. But of course, this is not a tough requirement, it's rather a recommendation. And then if you, for example, as we were discussing in the beginning, an incumbent company, and you want to keep your clients, what will you do? Then you say, okay, I may work in such a way that I make my files under such format that it's not easily transferred to a third party. Then this could be problematic in two aspects. First, as you mentioned, for data portability of the data of the natural persons. And second, if you look into the competition aspect, this means you're still keeping data for yourself and not sharing with other companies. And if you are dominant, this is an interesting behavior that authorities will be looking into in the future. So again, personal data, very special category of data, which is subject to additional protective measures, but again, data which is also looked at from another perspective of being available and not available for the players on the market. And going into the third aspect of algorithms, pretty much in the blue box above, you can see how different authorities define algorithms. Very, very broad definition. I would say pretty much anything that you put into a system and then you get the output. And no matter how you qualify it, it's interesting to see some different types of algorithms, and especially the ones that different government bodies are more interested in. You can define algorithms by many criteria, like the task they perform, the input parameters, the learning method, but I think the more interesting ones, the first two bubbles that you see. One is based on the interpretability of the algorithm, and here you can have two types, descriptive and black box. The descriptive algorithms are such where a human being can actually interpret what's going on in that algorithm, how it works, what's its code, what is the output that you get, what are the operations behind it. The black box algorithms are such algorithms that are not interpretable to humans. Pretty much, you actually don't know what's going on. You may build something, you give it an initial push in a certain direction, but then the algorithm develops in a way that you cannot control. And then we get maybe to the self-learning algorithms, which are designed in such a way to gain experience. We can say that from the operation, build on it, and then evolve. A very interesting question that's been put forward to some authorities already is, what's the liability of a company that has self-learning, let's say, black box algorithm? Is it, if something goes wrong, many things can go, but let's imagine we have it, and there is a breach of data or price fixing, which is something that's a hardcore breach of competition law, then two options have been discussed so far. One is that that algorithm is actually being considered as a company employee, meaning that the employer, the company, is responsible for the actions of that algorithm, and you should take the consequences of whatever happened due to that algorithm. And the second option, which for me seems a more reasonable one, at least, but you never know what might come from the authorities, is that if you have applied to such self-learning algorithm the so-called reasonable standard of care and foreseeability, then it should be fine for you, meaning in the production process and development of the algorithm, you put necessary steps in place to mitigate the risks, that you have put prospective monitoring in place, and you've taken into account potential developments, means that you've put some thought into it and you did not let it run rampant without having any overview. Which in the end, if something wrong happens, because as I said, it's a self-learning black box algorithm, then you will be able to claim that you've done the necessary steps to defend and to beat the people or the output that's coming. And yeah, that's an interesting and interaction between the algorithms, and so far authorities are looking with quite interest into self-learning black box algorithms. If you look into algorithms in competition, it should always be good to keep in mind a couple of things where problems can occur. Purely theoretically, you have horizontal agreements, vertical agreements that you have to separate contexts that competition looks into different transactions and agreements between companies. Horizontal context meaning players on the same level of the chain or the market. If you're looking at supply chain, for example, or the manufacturers on the one level, so the horizontal context, or the distributors, same level horizontal context. And the vertical context are the relations between, let's say, manufacturer and distributor, or between distributor and retailer, because that's how their relation goes. What can algorithms do that is not being perceived well, or let's say even illegal from authorities? Algorithms can be used to support traditional anti-competitive practices. For example, they can help you discuss and share sensitive information with your competitors, which you are not allowed to. Maybe you know that competitors are not allowed to share information on their prices, market strategies, and such sensitive commercial topics. Then there could be collusion between competitors involving a third party. Imagine you have a supplier and your competitor also have the same supplier. That same supplier provides to you the same or pretty much the same algorithm, which works in a way that in the end leads to behavior of the companies which is coordinated. And collusion induced by parodies of individual algorithms. It's also possible that you could have your own algorithm, which, for example, works in a way, and these days most commonly monitoring competitor prices, and then your other competitor also have their own algorithm, which also does the same thing, and then in the end they reach out to the same result, which could be problematic. In the vertical context, and I think there we have more case law and more actual cases from different authorities around the world, is using algorithms for resale price maintenance. And resale price maintenance is the practice where for example, the producer of goods wants to press distributors to resell the products that they have bought from the producer at specific fixed or minimum price, which is not allowed under competition law. Then algorithms can be used for monitoring recommended prices. You can recommend prices to your customers, but you cannot oblige them to stick to them, at least in most jurisdictions. This is not the case for all countries. And you may use that algorithm to see how your customers are sticking to your recommended prices. And if they are not, then you can take some measures against them and retaliate, which is again a behavior which is illegal. And price matching could be problematic in vertical context. Let's say retailer A uses an algorithm which which results in resale price maintenance. So, and then you have retailer B who also uses a price algorithm who monitors the steps of the algorithm of retailer A, and then not knowingly, of course, in that situation, it also reaches to certain levels of resale price maintenance because it collects information from the first algorithm and the data it produces. And maybe lastly, to look into a strategy to create some compliant algorithms. First of all, it's important that you know what the risks are in the industry you are looking into. There are some common risks like for data privacy, antitrust, but you may have some specific aspects relevant for your industry, like ethical codes in the healthcare industry, or marketing codes for PR agencies, marketing agencies, and creative agencies, which is something you need to take into account. And before you release that new application in your program, it's best that you have some compliance or risk assessment, which encompasses a review of those aspects that could be problematic. And again, it's not an exhaustive list, depending on the industry that you're working with. It could be data privacy, it could be competition, it could be intellectual property, it could be foreign trade law, ethical codes, as I mentioned before, many different aspects, really dependent on the industry that you're in. Something that is a very good practice, and that's the training for the employees, to let them know of the risks that are relevant to your business. And something that's new and recommended by authorities is that you also train your IT employees who develop the algorithms on aspects of privacy and competition. So when they start building an algorithm, they do not make it such that it fixes prices or acts in such a way that you reach to resale price maintenance. And if you are able to prove that you took necessary steps, and we are talking about, again, this reasonable standard of care enforceability that you have applied, it would be easier for you to defend later on if you are in a situation when you get an investigation by authorities. Another step that you need, or it's recommended that you take, is monitoring the effects and the development of your algorithm, especially if it's a black box self-learning algorithm. And you see what it does, whether the output that it gets and the results it provides are in line with legislation or with the expectations, if it's a black box one, and if something's out of order, that you make the necessary steps to fix that. special attention to the input data, the output data, the decision-making process connected with the algorithm. It's always good that you document that, so it's seen that you have thought about it before you've released it for the market. Then don't rely on chances. It's even if you have, let's say, a black box self-learning algorithm, it will be very difficult to argue before the authorities in some investigation that it's not your responsibility or liability because you didn't know what it would do. In the end, even if it's a self-learning algorithm and if it's a black box algorithm, it's you who have given it the first push and made it to work into a certain direction. So you bear that, at least that initial responsibility. And as you've seen, depending on how authorities look into it, you may be liable for it as if it were your employee, or then a better option if you go to the reasonable standard of care and foreseeability. Something also to mention, because there are different industries, different algorithms, different tools that are used. Each assessment is specific and for each case. So you cannot apply, let's say, a template for each and every application that you release. Of course, maybe there are some applications which you can group under certain categories, but then each and every case is being looked at least from the authorities, for the specificities of that case. And just as general observations, so far, main interest of the authorities has been in the so-called black box self-learning and pricing algorithms, with keen interest on collusion and resale price maintenance. And this is just as some brief overview of possible strategy to create compliant algorithms. And I think we are about time to go into any questions, if there are any.
Yeah, Ivelin, there is a question from Davor. It's in the chat room. You can just go through it.
Okay, if I understand it correctly, the question is whether the digital version of existing product would qualify as a platform. It really depends on what that digital solution does. If it's an existing product with well-known, for the banks I'm talking about, well-known history in the non-digital world, it does not necessarily mean that the digital solution for that product would qualify as non-risk. Pretty much my opinion on this, and again, it's strictly personal in that direction. A platform could be any tool or IT algorithm that you could have to connect two sides, two parties at least. Whether you use an intermediary on that or not, it really depends on the specific functionalities you want to have for that product. But yeah, good approach for digitalization of banks. Yeah, as I said, if you look at the strategy, look into the specifics in the industry, always look at data privacy and competition aspects, because those are the ones which bring you the highest fines if something goes wrong. And then digging deeper into financial regulations that are relevant for banks, considering how you structure your digital solution. And yeah, I would again agree that what banks do, if it's an existing product and if it's not linking to many parties, it may not be qualified as a platform. But again, it would really depend on how you do it and what is the input and output and the idea behind it. I don't know whether I was able to answer, but hopefully I did.
I think you have answered his question. I don't see any questions there. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so I would request Evelyn to upload your presentation in the chat box as well for the participants.
Sure.
With file option, and there you can upload it.
I think I can do that right now.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So, oh yeah, it's done. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
And it was a nice presentation. Thanks for your time. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for the participants as well and the questions. If there's anything, if someone mails me, I will forward it to you for you to answer it later on. So thank you so much and have a nice day. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Peter.
Bye, Ivelin.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.